Professor, I'm looking at a letter dated March 16, 2020. It's a letter to Governor Lamont in Connecticut. The title of it is Urgent Action Needed to Protect Individuals in Connecticut's Prisons and Jails from Coronavirus 19 Pandemic. Did you sign that letter?
So I don't recall sitting here today, Senator.
Here's your signature. Here it is back here. Why didn't you turn this over to us when you were asked to submit documents?
So, Senator, I made every effort to search for everything that I had ever signed. That's not a letter I remember, but I will certainly take a look at that. And
We found it was with a search on the internet.
so I apologize, Senator. I apologize.
In
that
your
I
letter
missed
to the
that.
governor, here's what you say. As they stand, prisons and jails are detrimental to public health and human rights and disproportionately harm marginalized communities, including Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other communities of color, immigrants, people with mental illness, people with disabilities, people in the LGBTQ plus community, people who use drugs, people engaged in sex work and street economies, and people experiencing houselessness and poverty. So if you believe that about our prisons, how are you going to ever send somebody to prison?
So, Senator, I will need to take a look at that letter, and I apologize that that's not something I found to hand to this committee.
You're not denying you said that.
I do need to see the letter to see the context, because again, it's not something I remember adding my name to. I can assure you,
Right.
Senator.
And you also say, first, you call on Governor Lamont to release everybody in jail. Is that right? Because of the coronavirus?
So again, Senator, I would need to see that letter in front of me. It certainly was not.
You can find it just put your name into Google. You'll find it in about 3 nanoseconds.
I will, Senator. I can assure you that
You said in your letter, Professor, we call on Governor Lamont, state of Connecticut, and all Connecticut jurisdictions to immediate release to the maximum extent possible people incarcerated pre-trial and post-conviction. And then you go on to say, talking once again about our jails, the global COVID-19 pandemic is throwing into sharp relief the untenable state of our penal system and the need for sustained action to shrink its scale, shrink its size, and shrink its scope. You sound here like the district attorney in San Francisco. If you believe that, how are you going to ever send us anybody to jail, Professor?
I can assure you, Senator, that I understand the role of the judge, and that I can assure you prison time is an appropriate sentence in many cases.
That's not what you say here to the governor. You wrote the governor. This isn't some DoorDash delivery guy. You wrote the governor of your state 3 years ago.
So again, Senator.
I'm in law school.
So again, Senator, I would need to look at the letter. It sounds like it was written at the height of the pandemic, where governors were looking for.
You also wrote the governor, you said people over the age of 55 are at the greatest risk for COVID-19, but also pose the least public safety risk to our communities. People in this age group can and should be released immediately to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. You think the governor if you're over the age of 55, he should let everybody go?
No, Senator, that's not a position.
That's what you said.
Okay.
Here it is, big as Dallas.
Again, Senator, I will look at that letter. I can assure you that.
Find it on Google, Professor. You also say Governor Lamont should issue an executive order to direct the state's attorney offices and law enforcement entities, including the town and city police departments, and any federal law enforcement entity operating within the state to immediately cease adding to the incarcerated prison population given the high risk of infection posed by the population increase. You asked the governors to tell every law enforcement official in the state to stop arresting people and putting them in jail, didn't you?
So again, Senator, I have to look at that letter.
don't remember.
I do think there were modifications that the governors were making around the country to respond to the
You also
pandemic.
had an opinion in your letter about, can I have another 30 seconds, Mr.? You had an opinion in your letter about immigration. You said, immigration detention poses the same health risk to jails and prisons, and Connecticut law enforcement must stop feeding people into the unsafe and inhumane immigration detention system. Then you say, Governor Lamont should release all individuals currently in state custody who are awaiting transfer to ICE custody, and the governor should declare a moratorium on all such future transfers. How, if somebody is in our country illegally and commits a crime, are you going to put them in jail if you believe this about immigration?
Senator, I can assure you, were I so fortunate to be confirmed, I would treat crimes
That's not
seriously.
what this letter says, Professor, and it was 3 years ago. It wasn't when you were in law school, and you didn't turn it over to us. We had to find it on our own. Ms. Russell sent a letter to the governor of Connecticut during the pandemic. Here's what she said, quote, "As they stand, prisons and jails are detrimental to public health and human rights and disproportionately harm marginalized communities, including Black, brown, indigenous, and other communities of color, immigrants, people with mental illness, people with disabilities, people in the LGBTQ plus community, people who use drugs, people engaged in sex work and street economies, and people experiencing houselessness and poverty." Then she went on to request the governor to immediately release everybody in jail in Connecticut. It's unclear to me whether she was talking about just during the pandemic or on a permanent basis. Then she goes on to tell the governor of Connecticut to stop putting people in jail. And it's still unclear to me whether she meant just for the duration of the pandemic or on an extended basis. And on top of all of that, the cherry on top, she didn't turn the letter over to the committee. I don't know why she didn't. Perhaps she thought, I'm not saying this is the case, she thought we wouldn't find it. It took about 7.3 minutes on Google to find it. Now, this is America. Ms. Russell has a constitutional right to believe in these things and to say those things. She does not have a constitutional right to be a federal judge. And she's not qualified to be a federal judge if those are her beliefs. How can any criminal defendant in front of her or any prosecutor in front of her think that they're getting a fair shake in light of this letter when she sentences someone to prison, if she ever does sentence someone to prison? It's just simply breathtaking. And for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be voting no.
Extraordinarily
Would the
distinguished.
senator yield for a question?
Mr. Chairman, my name was invoked. Can I respond just quickly?
Senator Kennedy.
I appreciate Senator Blumenthal's comments. But Richard, here's how I see it. She got caught. She got caught. She had an epiphany once she got caught. And I am looking at her qualifications, and I am looking at her record. And I don't know that she didn't help write this letter. I know she signed it. And I know she tried to hide it from this committee. So even if you agree with her that we should stop, that actions have no consequences, and that nobody's ever responsible anymore, and it's always somebody else's fault when a criminal sodomizes a young girl, and everybody ought to get a trophy. I mean, I wish we lived in a world like that, but that's what she believes. And you know it, and I know it. And she has recanted after she got caught, and she got caught because she didn't turn it over to us, for God's sakes. Senator, we had to find it on our own. Shame on her. And every single time when she has got to, on the federal bench, she has got to sentence a criminal defendant, this is going to be grounds for appeal. For God's sakes, does the rule of law mean nothing?
The Senator, you for a question?
Certainly I do, Senator, and I apologize for not using
No, that's
Senator.